Okay, so think about this. This is quite amazing. So remember in the beginning, Adam and Eve, they had this commandment from God. They were not supposed to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? That was one of their commandments of something they were not supposed to do. But then they had a command of what they were supposed to do, which is even more fascinating. The Lord told Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply, right? And subdue the earth. And the interesting part is that they never did that, actually, until they were kicked out of the garden, you see, because they ate from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and they were cut off from the fruit of the tree of life, and they were expelled from the Garden of Eden because of their sin. And so before they obeyed the commandment that God gave them to do, they went and disobeyed the commandment of what God told them not to do. Okay, this is really interesting. And it wasn't until after they were kicked out of the garden that Adam and Eve finally obeyed the commandment of what God told them to do, which was to be fruitful and multiply. And it says that Adam knew his wife, Eve, after they got kicked out of the garden, meaning they didn't have sex with each other until after they got kicked out of the Garden of Eden. They didn't listen to God. They didn't have an intimacy with each other until after they got kicked out. And now, isn't this so symbolic? Think about it. The Lord has told us to be fruitful and multiply, okay? But we go about it the wrong way, you see. Just like Eve, okay? The command was to be fruitful and multiply. But instead of looking for fruit that comes out of intimacy with her beloved, she looked for fruit that was outside of her relationship, right? She looked for fruit that was hanging on this tree that she was not supposed to be partaking of. But if she would have just found intimacy with the one that she loved, she would have naturally produced the fruit of a baby that she was supposed to, and thereby fulfilling the commandment of God. And that's what it looks like for us, I think, in the church, is that so many of us want to obey God by being fruitful and multiplying, right? And that is a good desire. It is a good desire that we would want to have our husband's baby, But it doesn't come from striving for things outside of ourselves. You see, what we do is we focus so much on this area in the world or area in our lives that we would like to produce fruit in. And we focus and put our attention on that thing, which is actually outside of ourselves. But what Jesus is asking us to do, just like he asked Adam and Eve to do, was to focus on finding intimacy with him, with our husband. And when we focus on him and loving him in the secret place, guess what? We are fruitful and we will multiply through the intimacy of a husband and a wife, right? But a lot of times we get so stressed out and we want to produce fruit so badly that we skip the first part. And we say, I just got to go perform. I just got to go do. I got to infiltrate that area of the world and share the gospel and bring everyone to repentance. And it's like, yeah, that's good, but are we skipping the first step? Right? Because there is good fruit in the tree of life right now that we could be eating from. But I don't think a lot of us are eating from that tree, because Jesus Christ is that tree. He is the vine where all the fruit comes out of. He is the tree of life, and we have access to him, right? In the secret place, inside of ourselves, he lives. He lives in us already. So we don't have to go anywhere to get it. But he's beckoning us to actually draw close to him and stop worrying about all these things outside of us, the things we got to do, the things we got to take care of, we got to perform, all the fruit we need to bear, all the souls we need to save. That stuff is secondary. And unless we realize that and stop idolizing things that are outside of ourselves and realize that we are already seated in heavenly places with Christ and he lives inside of us and our life is hidden in him, it says, and he is in the Father. But when Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will appear with him in glory. And so we're not trying to bear this fruit outwardly. We should be focused on the fact that everything we need is already inside of us, because that's where Christ lives. And that's where our true self lives. The baby who is waiting to be born, the child of God who is waiting to become manifest, will appear when Christ appears in us. And so it's not something we can just produce through our own strength and zeal and actions and works. It's just not. And let's just produce children the way that God intended. Be fruitful and multiply by being intimate with Jesus. Instead of waiting until we sin and get kicked out of the Garden of Eden because we're trying to do things our own way. To me it's fascinating that a husband and a wife would have a command to make babies together, literally, from God, and to enjoy one another in intimacy. And they were so concerned about this other fruit that's in this other tree. Why? That other fruit was meaningless. It nothing compared to what God had already given them in one another. And it's in all this fruit that we want to bear is nothing compared to what God has already given us in our beloved husband Jesus. Let us find intimacy with him and delight in him,